So every day I have all different kinds of articles and reports sent to me, kind of get an idea as to what's going on, or maybe to alert me for something to add into Newswave. And I do appreciate these kind of messages. And in some cases, I like to look at them and actually explain a bit more about what's going on, especially when it starts to work into kind of the wheelhouse of repairs or some of the hardware inside of these systems. And one thing popped up online that did catch my interest, and I looked a bit more into it, and unfortunately I will be giving some bad news, but then also some good news, especially if you're someone still looking to get a PlayStation 5. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure you like it and subscribe if you're new here to the SpawnWave Plus channel. So let me show you exactly what's going on here with this article that popped up today. This is from PSU, said PS5 detachable disk drive rumors gather steam via new Sony patent. And I thought to myself, okay, well, if there's a patent that, as they say here, mentions a detachable disk drive, we could be onto something, because before we had heard from Insider Gaming and Tom Henderson that there were plans this year, I assume this holiday now looking at it, for a new revision of the PlayStation 5 to be released, one that would work on Sony's end to more or less consolidate their manufacturing down to one SKU, and then have an optional disk drive that you can buy and just kind of attach, we assume, to the side, and then maybe through a USB-C plug or a proprietary plug on the back or something there. And when you hear about a patent popping up showing Sony actually working on this, then it starts to kind of add up, and everything seems like it would be in order for a holiday 2023 release. But as I started to look into where this was linking to, so we have, this is from Segment Next. They say Sony patents a detachable optical disk drive, ? For the PS5. And I started to look through this patent a bit. The biggest reason that they mention here as to why it's detachable is because it's labeled as a mountable drive, as in listed below, each disclose an optical disk drive that can be mounted in electronic equipment such as a game machine, personal computer, or audio-visual AV equipment. Now, there were some questions about some of the images that were showcased here. And from what I can tell, just kind of looking at this at a glance, this basically is the PlayStation 5 disk drive. And it is kind of cool to get these looks at it from way of a patent, as you get a nice exploded view, as well as really descriptions as to what everything in here does, and even some theories as to how they continue to make it better. But if we go over to the patent here, it was filed on March 25th, 2021, with publication, looks like September, well, they have September 21st, 2022, and then it was published April 20th, 2023. So pretty recently. And mounting, or saying a drive can be mounted, doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, it's detachable disk drive from the outside. It could just legitimately be one that's inside of the system, but you can detach it if you have the device open, like you do with any of these disk drives. Sony's disk drives they're modular. You can remove them, replace the laser. You can change out the daughter board if you need to, but you do kind of need specialized equipment for. However, nothing in there is necessarily soldered down. You don't have board-to-board soldering for something like the PlayStation 5, the 3, the 4. So looking at this here, I'm more or less seeing a patent, as they describe here, to fix the vibration for the disk drive that's currently inside of your PlayStation 5. And in order to kind of show that, if we go all the way down here, which, by the way, again, the images are very, very in-depth. You see all the different gears and the motors and how the mechanism works, which it is pretty impressive. If you ever have opened up one of these disk drives and you remove the lid, it's pretty terrifying experience, because there are so many things that have to work together just to get the disk drive to slide in and then mount correctly, have the spindle pop up and start to turn it and laser read, that you kind of get an idea as to why the patent is 32 pages long of them just showing off how it works. But like here, you can see the ribbon cable, and again, that would just plug into the motherboard. So I'm not really seeing something that would necessarily be detachable from the outside. And again, the top here, yes, looks just like a PlayStation 5 enclosure for the disk drive. But down here, they do have the technical problem summary, And it says, in many cases, the center of gravity of an optical disc is slightly displaced from the center of the optical disc. Thus, there is a problem that when the spindle motor rotates the optical disc, a base unit, including the spindle motor, is vibrated, with the resulting vibration transmitted to the outer case for the optical drive. And the idea here is they are trying to solve the issue that if you have a PS5 and you change out discs, maybe you buy physical discs consistently and you drop them in, you know when it's spinning the disk drive. Or if you're just playing the game and randomly it has to spin the disc up to do a check or something there, you hear it. And at sometimes I've had the PS5 vibrate very, very loudly to where I wasn't sure if there was a problem. Or I think it also depends on if you have it in the vertical or horizontal orientation. I notice it more in the horizontal setup than the vertical setup, but there's very clearly a vibration issue inside of that disk drive. And it's a shame because otherwise the system, actually both the Xbox Series X and the PS5, solved the big problem from the last couple of generations. Those are just loud systems. I mean, really, think about the Xbox 360 and the PS3. That's probably the worst that we've had when it comes to our systems just completely blowing out any speakers we have, of just air flying out of the back and the fan spinning up really, really fast. Now, clearly you won't have an issue if your device is all digital, whether it's a Series S or the PlayStation 5 digital system, but it's pretty obvious that Sony is sticking with a disk drive PS5 the rest of this generation. Maybe next generation we'll have another conversation about that, but if they are indeed working to build out this modular disk drive for a one SKU PS5, you wouldn't want it to be vibrating there either, because we assume it's going to also be up against the outside casing, and that could make all kinds of crazy sounds. So this, sure, could be them looking towards the future of, okay, we have to have a disk drive that's not going to vibrate like crazy. But I'm more or less looking at this as them working to refine the disk drive inside the PlayStation 5. And they've actually done this along with Microsoft and even Nintendo, and I think about it, for all their different systems. As we go along throughout the generation, they will target different parts inside of the system, whether it's the motherboard just basically being reformed and parts being moved all over the place, or even other components like the disk drive that saw a ton of revisions, I'll say, with the PS3 and the Xbox 360, even with like the PS4 and the Xbox One. So none of this is shocking to me, but I would say it's actually good news to hear that as we go along, we would probably have a PS5 that could be as silent as possible, even with a disk drive inside spinning. And I am happy that Sony has recognized that problem, because it becomes pretty obvious, again, if you're popping discs in consistently, whether it's when it's installing or just going through a random check. So unfortunately, not seeing anything here that absolutely says, oh, they're working on a detachable disk drive. Just using the word mount doesn't necessarily mean much in this case, and looking at the images still appears to be an internal disk drive. But of course, I'll keep you guys up to date if we run across anything that looks a bit more like a detachable disk drive that would go on the outside of the casing. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.